welcome to another episode of Thinking It Through with Nate. I am your host, Nate. Today we have a special episode. I had my first guest on the podcast, my friend Nick Kuntz. We had a great discussion. Before we get to that, though, I just want to remind you that you can subscribe using the link in the description to Supercast. Anybody who subscribed there, even on the free plan, will receive the audio version of the podcast a day early when I have guests on. So I'm just trying to add benefits to subscribing, so go ahead and head over there and do that. So in the conversation, we had a lot of great discussions. That ranged from topics on health, the freedom versus public benefit dynamic, education, greenwashing, flow arts, curated experiences, public forums, algorithms, social media, festivals, inspiration. So a lot of great topics. I think you'll enjoy the conversation. There were a couple things that I just wanted to touch on. You'll notice here that the audio and video get unsunk at a couple points, and I do apologize for that. I'm trying to figure out what's happening. I did try to resync it at a couple points for you, but I'll figure that out soon. I have a couple ideas on how I can fix that, so just hang with me. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was that we talked about body shaming and fat shaming and body acceptance and stuff like that. And at one point I used the word body types when I meant to say body weights. And so I just want to be clear that, of course, we should be accepting of all body types, as everybody's different and we have different shapes and sizes and things like that. But what I was trying to say is more so that when it comes to people being medically obese and extremely unhealthy, of course we should be respectful and accepting of that. And we should encourage them to be accepting of themselves, but we should also encourage goal setting and improvement and trying to live a more satisfying life, and especially encouraging that for children. So that's one of the things I wanted to touch on. And the other one that I wanted to touch on was a question that Nick asked me during the podcast about soda taxes. And so I had previously stated my opinion that I oppose soda taxes, and the reasoning behind that was because typically they've been used to try to discourage people from buying it by making it more expensive. And I don't like that because I think it's not the role of the government to say what we should and shouldn't consume, and I say that in the podcast. But he gave the point that what if we use that tax, though, just to fund programs to teach health education at a young age, like in school, and have better health education in school and stuff like that. And that actually kind of opened my eyes to that possibility, and that kind of makes sense to me. You're kind of using a behavior that's negative, and also especially is negative because it sets poor role models for children, and they grow up thinking that's normal, and may grow up with bad habits and stuff like that, and end up leading less satisfying lives, which is not something we want for our kids. So I thought that was a great point, and something that I actually am a lot more open-minded to. So just wanted to give those couple reflections after that conversation before you guys listen. So without any further ado, Nick Kuntz. All right, so I have here with me Nick Kuntz. He's a friend of mine. We've met probably about 6-7 months ago. Feel like we've been having a lot of great conversations, and so wanted to get one of those on the podcast. So yeah, thanks for joining me. How are you today?
Of course, I'm good. I'm great.
Awesome. So I wanted to dive into a topic that I felt like is important to you and that we've talked about a lot, and that is health. And so we've talked about physical health specifically. So I just wanted to ask, when did this become important to you, / what got you interested in it?
Well, I guess the short answer would be that I got called fat by one of my close friends in high school.
Yeah.
And he didn't just call me fat, he called me like tubby or something like that.
Okay.
And he was somebody that I guess I didn't understand at the time, but looking back on it now, I kind of admired him a little bit and really respected his friendship. And so it cut me deep. I didn't really unpack any of that or understand it then.
Yeah.
I just know that I felt like shit about it. And can we?
Oh yeah, of course, of course.
Cool. Anyway, so he made me feel really bad about myself, but I was thankful for it because he opened my eyes. And he wasn't wrong necessarily. Like, he was being really kind of just mean for no reason. He was just lashing out at me. But
sure.
I did start to realize I had broken my foot, and I'd been an athlete, like a competitive athlete and whatnot, so I just was used to eating however I wanted, and I had broken my foot and was immobilized for longer than I'd ever been before, and I just started like gaining weight without realizing it, and then by the time I was like back on my feet, literally, I like barely even recognized myself, so that was kind of a big wake-up call for sure.
Interesting. So you kind of were already into sports and being athletic, so like that part of health was kind of automatic for you.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until you realized that like when you're not being active, how you eat is really affecting your body that kind of kicked in.
Yeah, and the sport part wasn't exactly health. It was like, it was sport. It was competitive. Like I, was on a team full of my buds, and we were going to beat the other team, that whole thing. So the whole aspect of health never really even like started until years down the road. I was really hyper focused on aesthetics and personal image because I went through kind of a rough breakup around that time too, and my whole perception of myself was really negative and poor and not healthy at all, and so I was like kind of like really focused on changing that and being happy with how I viewed myself. Yeah. And I got to a point where I got to a point where I was like, I should be happy with what I'm looking at, but I just wasn't. And it was right around then when I started to realize that like I'm only focusing on like what the mirror is showing me, and I'm not focusing on what I'm able to kind of feel internally. Yeah. And then that's when I really started to be like, oh, there's a whole nother like degree to all of this. Is pursuing how you look is not pursuing your health whatsoever. Yeah. And that was a really important distinction for me to understand, and it's definitely helped me out a lot.
Yeah, I agree. That is a super important distinction, and I think it's one that this culture especially needs to have pointed out to them.
Agreed, yeah. But I mean, unfortunately, when it comes to this culture, especially when it comes to the topic of health, that's a super complex kind of scenario, but for me, it boils down to like, you have to have something to sell, and people just aren't willing to kind of work for themselves,
Yeah. Yeah, I want to touch on that first point you said about having something to sell, because I think that idea of capitalism kind of pervades our whole society. Mm-hmm. And I think we're in agreement that it's not necessarily capitalism that's the problem. It's more so consumerism and the idea that you have to be either continually consuming something, or to be successful, you have to sell something. So how would you say that plays into how we see health? And how that kind of affects our day-to-day behaviors?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that people generally, I speak in a lot of generalities, and it's something I've noticed that I really need to like fix, because it's not fair to most people, But my general consensus is that most people view health, right? Like, we're viewing it as a market, and it's not. It's like, it should be an aspect of your life, and your happiness and who you are as an individual. It shouldn't be something that's monetized. It shouldn't be something that's incentivized whatsoever through like commerce or exchanges. Other than ideas, right? And other than like ways to improve each other. But it's weird because if you want to host a facility that people can use to make themselves better, that requires money to keep it going. So there's got to be some sort of balance there for sure, but I think most people view health as some sort of like market, and it really shouldn't be a market. It should be like an essential kind of thing in everybody's life. Yeah.
That's an interesting line to draw, because I think we see that across society, where it's like, because we are a market-driven society, any value added to society kind of has to participate in that. Mm-hmm. But where's the line between that becoming something that people are just doing for greed and for their own self-profit?
Mm-hmm. I think it's crazy because it's just weird, because there's the overarching theme of everything that we're talking about on this topic is balance, right? And I think it's strange because like we've found a way to sell teaching people how to breathe, like really essential things that everybody should just know and be taught from a young age. Like, where people had figured out like, oh, this is the optimal way to do this, and then they immediately go on like a nationalized tour going to every city and teaching workshops.
Buy my book.
And I mean, it's necessary, right? Like, and good for them. I'll fully support whoever I can so that they can live a happy life teaching things that make people better. Like, I think that's super cool. But I just think it's weird that we live in a world where that's a way these people kind of get that information out there. It's just strange. Yeah. If it's not trending, then it's not gonna make it. But if it's trending too much, then it
becomes tacky.
Yeah, or you're for me, I'm hyper skeptical. I'm like,
oh yeah,
I don't want to get involved with that because to me, it's like maybe it's a pyramid scheme. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think last closing thought on that is that pyramid schemes have completely like perverted and diluted the importance of health in a general sense.
Yeah.
Like, I've always been super kind of focused on fitness, and it's always health and fitness, right? But if you think about the holistic health pyramid kind of thing, fitness is definitely part of that.
Absolutely.
But I think like MLMs and pyramid schemes have had a huge hand in kind of making like the pursuit of health almost like a taboo thing.
Yeah.
And just not that interesting to most people.
That's fair. It becomes niche.
Yeah.
Cool. So a question I wanted to ask that you kind of touched on was about how health is kind of always sold to us and how that became part of the market. And I think this can become a really toxic thing for us because when health and happiness are sold to you, you start to internalize the idea that it's something external that you need to get. That need is created rather than it just being something that's internal.
Yeah.
So, how would you say that's manipulated how we act about health?
I mean, it always starts off with like some novel idea that's not that novel. It's like oversimplified. And you want to spread the gospel, so to speak, to as many people as possible. And then you have people who see the kind of the benefits, and they see how many people probably need this type of action. And then they see an opportunity to package it, and then sell it to them instead of, it's like, why would we give it to them when we could sell it to them kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. So almost creating like an unnecessary product to satisfy a need that could have been satisfied without that product.
Exactly.
Just with some knowledge.
Yeah. And like a lot of these needs, like, we're all aware of like meditation and breath work in general becoming a lot more of a popular thing. Like that, literally, like, it's the simplest thing in the world. Breathe more.
Yeah.
Do it quietly and alone. You know what I mean? Just breathe more. But like that in and of itself has been something that's been packaged up and put into an ebook and put into a seminar and put into like this 16-week program that, you can buy. Yeah. And ultimately not do. Right? Because it all comes from within. It's not something that you need to acquire in order to like successfully practice.
Yeah, so meditation's a really interesting one on this because I myself am guilty of buying a couple meditation books.
I mean, books are one thing, but books are like that, like underrated. Like there's some real. There can be some gold,
and also some toxicity. What's interesting about the meditation realm, though, is that ideally it should be something that's offered for free. I completely agree with that. But when somebody gets to the point where they have something to offer and you have to spend thousands of hours to get to that point, how it becomes a question of how can they sustain themselves and live while offering that resource. And so I also like get that same perspective when I see, oh, you're charging me for a meditation class. There's no way I'm going to do that. Like I understand where they're coming from, but I mean, maybe this is a new thought to you, but just off the bat, what are some things that might be able to fix that dynamic? How can we sustain people's livelihood that are experts in topics without making it seem like they're just like taking advantage of people?
It's a good question. It's something I think about a lot. I mean, to relate it to something else, this is how I see it. Like in the music industry, you have an artist who creates some sort of new sound or some sort of new experience and gets really popular because of it. And the next thing you know, a little later down the line, you have just this like mass amount of people kind of like copying it and regurgitating it as their own thing with their own little spin on it, and it starts to become obvious because you're like, this is like this person's thing. I can clearly see that you're kind of copying it, and it's no longer like an original idea. So you can almost, just through the saturation of like all the bullshit, you can kind of pick out what's authentic and genuine and true and real, you know? But yeah, I mean, it's just the way our society is structured. Like, I don't think it's really easy to do.
So the problem is more so the amount of people using it to take advantage of people and creating that perspective than just doing it.
Right.
itself.
I mean, I think a lot of this stuff is almost like it should be encouraged as a individual like self-pursuit.
Yeah.
And obviously there's going to be experts that you can like pursue yourself, but it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Solution.
So historically, things, especially like meditation, have been donation based. They may establish a center, and then people can come and seek them out in the typical lineage fashion that has worked with meditation for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And then you just donate what you can to keep them afloat.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So in the case of donation, like an idea would be that, or meditation is that, like, let's say you have a facility where people can go and practice. Well, you give out all the information of like how to do it on your own for free, obviously, right? Like that's free anyway.
Yeah.
You just kind of package it up to be free of bullshit, right?
Sure.
And you just get like the facts.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do. But enhancers are what you would be willing to pay for, right? To have the room, or to, like, let's say
one-on-one discussion or something like that.
Sure, some sort of instruction, right? Like some sort of like counsel, I guess. Sure. You could also have like guided meditations. You could have all sorts of. You could have like a room full of instruments. You can do a sound bath, like enhancers, right? Like things that you can take this free basic thing that everybody has access to and can do on their own at their own house, but make them like basically not want to do it at their house because you can just
an extra thing that might make the experience better or make it easier to meditate or something like that.
Or just more effective. And,
sure.
Yeah, like for me, like I can lay my my floor in my room and kind of like peacefully meditate as much as I want, but it's just not the same as using a float tank, for instance. And so I'll go pay and use a float tank and get way more out of it than I would have at my house after for like a week, you know.
Cool.
It's like a week's worth of chilling
in
an hour.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great way to put it.
But again, like this is like the mentality that's been conditioned into us.
Yeah.
Like I said, balance.
Yeah.
You want to be able to sustain your life, and you know, you don't want to feed into this like corporate crap, right? Working 9 to 5 in an office, plugging away in some computer that you don't even own but you're responsible for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that stuff's stupid. So you want to make your own living in your own life, so you got to make money. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard dynamic.
Exploit others, right? So.
Yeah, it's a very hard dynamic to exist in a capitalist world, and I think partially our generation is learning how to like go about that a little bit better. And I think we have a lot of work to do on that, but I think we'll get there. Part of that's going to be local community and supporting the people around you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned earlier that may be a potential solution to especially the physical health side of things being capitalized, and that's teaching it when people are young, right? So and especially getting that into the education system. How can we launch a successful campaign to actually modify the education system to consider real health and not get pulled away by all of these corporate messages? And I guess a topic is, have you ever heard the word greenwashing?
Yeah.
So this is when people will they call it greenwashing because they'll sell a product and say it's biodegradable when it's really not fully biodegradable. Yeah. And this, I think, applies in the health realm too.
Absolutely. Yeah, it totally does. I mean, it like the all of the health bars and stuff like that, like they even got the psychology down to where it's like we package in earthy tones, colors.
Exactly.
You look at the ingredients list and you're like brown rice syrup.
Yeah.
What? It's just
it's still added
it's just
sugar.
Syrup, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just processed sugar.
Exactly. So how do we get real healthy ideas of health into the education system without getting distracted by any of that corporate stuff?
It's focusing finances that way. I mean, it's just like anything else. Like we're really good with our military, right? We're really good with developing weapons.
Yeah.
Because we put a bunch of money into it.
Sure.
We focus on it. We make it a priority. It's as simple as
just
that.
Needs to become a priority.
Yeah.
So
everyone just says the education system, but no one has any specific dollars. They don't have any specific numbers, metrics, like nothing. They just say that we just need to like pay the teachers more.
So
we do all this, but like it literally just needs to be like higher up on the map, you know?
I completely agree with you on that. And I think what's behind what you're saying is that this needs to be a cultural change first. It's not just going to be like we need to pass a bill and everyone's already knows what we need to do. Like we actually need to get everybody on board with knowing what to do. So how do we make this more of a cultural value? How do we make it a priority?
I mean, I really think it is already in us, in our culture. I mean, everybody is very aware that teachers are severely underpaid or undervalued, I guess. Is a better way to say it. I think everyone is very aware about how unhealthy we are as a nation, I mean, all the way down to, I mean, most metrics when you talk about the U.S. are kind of inaccurate when you start to look at it by state or even a town-by-town basis, right? But when it comes to just how overwhelmingly unhealthy and overweight most people are, that is like across the board, town by town, county by county, border, like East Coast to West Coast, like we all know it, right? I don't think it would take much other than the freaking media, right? And the news sources that we pay attention most to. Just like that's all everybody talks about, right? You get these ideas planted in your head from the media that you look at the most, and the news that you watch the most and listen to the most, and those are what you talk about the most.
So this is something that we've talked about a little bit before as well. If the cultural message and the cultural value around health was correct, then that would help this. But currently the cultural message around health is very much around image, like you mentioned earlier, and specifically body weight. And because of that, there's been kind of a backlash of people who are saying, well, don't fat shame. We need to be completely accepting of all body types. And I think we agree with those statements, but it becomes a problem when people don't understand how to distinguish between acceptance of how you are and still having goals to improve.
Agreed. I mean, so like, for example, earlier I had mentioned that I was really kind of like, I felt really negative towards myself, right? And that was all driven through body image. Once I, like we just said, accepted me for whatever I was at that time, and I changed my attitude towards how I feel and how I perform and how I think and how I'm able to run and how I'm able to do whatever it is, you know, it kind of changed a lot for me.
So last question before we leave this topic. You've talked about that shift twice now. What caused that shift between doing it for image and then understanding what real health means?
Training for the military.
Cool.
I wanted to be good. I wanted to be the best. And when I was training for it, I realized that all of my working out leading up to that kind of like decision to get into that had failed me, right? Like I had abs, I had all these things, but what I didn't have was a 2-mile run.
Sure.
I needed to be acceptable, right? And I didn't have my ability to do push-ups like really well and fast and get as many as I can in 2 minutes. All that stuff just wasn't there. And so I was like, wow, I've been kind of thinking about this all wrong. I've been focusing on these things that I'm looking at rather than like metrics that I can like gauge and judge.
So more about performance than it is about appearance.
And performance is something that can be can kind of mess your head up if you get too hyper focused on it. So it's just like fitness in general, just being able to really I kind of understood and learned what functional fitness meant. And then you have the whole CrossFit TM thing going on at the time, and that was all really cool because I was just kind of reading their ideologies, and it changed how I was viewing things. And like their whole method or their whole motto was that, you know, fit for life. I want to be able to play with my kids when I'm older, like that whole thing. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And it got a lot of people up and moving and running like through the woods, doing Spartan races and stuff like that. And I was like, this is cool. There's a lot more to this than just like hunkering down, doing bicep curls in the gym and drinking your whey protein, you know what I mean?
Cool. I like that functional fitness. It's about how you feel, what you can actually do, and what makes sense.
Exactly.
So
that kind of changed my whole life.
That's awesome. That is really important. So I could ask a million more questions about this subject.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to touch on one thing. So you were saying something about body acceptance versus shaming and all that stuff. I think there's an important distinction between, like, obviously genetics and what you're born with.
Oh, yeah.
And accepting who you are right now and being okay with it because you know what the next step is forward, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm not particularly fond of this like anti-body shaming kind of thing. I think we should cultivate this idea in our culture where we can be honest with each other, right? I think that stretches, it's a multifaceted idea that is not novel whatsoever.
Yeah.
But people are afraid of the truth in every sense of the word, and especially when they know that it's about themselves and things that they're insecure about. Yeah. Like their weight, like their self-image, that kind of thing. And it's kind of like taking a Band-Aid off, man. Like you need to be told that you're overweight. You need to be told that you're not doing good health-wise in order for you to change it, right? Yeah. If you're just going to get angry and lash out because somebody told you some truth, maybe you didn't like the way they delivered it, that's fine. We can work on that. Yeah. Right? We can pretty up our language however you want to hear it. But like you still have to hear it. Yeah. And
that's a good point.
I'm afraid we've gone past the point where people are not just rejecting what they don't want to hear, but now it's almost like as a society we're refusing to even go near those topics anymore. You know?
I think that's super important, and I think that happens across a lot of subjects in our culture right now. Just having that mental fortitude to accept criticism is extremely important, and understand that like maybe that hurt my ego, but that doesn't mean that person was being mean.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. But I think that there is a huge debate right now around this specific topic of just physical health, which is the idea of freedom versus the public benefit. So with health, it's kind of difficult because if you tell someone, hey, you're overweight and you're very unhealthy, they might say, well, what is it to you? I don't care if I die young, and I just want to live my life how I live it.
Right.
And then you also hear on the other side of that, a lot of people will make the arguments that overweight people are actually a burden on our overall system. Mm-hmm. And Agreed. I can see both of those arguments because part of my political ideology started around the time where I was discovering psychedelic substances, and the ability and knowing that it was important for me to be able to choose what I consume stood out to me. And that's kind of been something that stayed consistent. But that also applies to health. Like, I don't believe in soda taxes, for instance. I don't believe that we should enforce people not to eat healthy. And so that also goes down to the level of like the social interaction of like saying, you know, trying to shame people or maybe guilt people or whatever, just wake them up to it. So if somebody is in the mindset where they don't feel like it matters or they don't care, how do you convince them that it does matter? Maybe not using the public benefit, but even using their own personal health or something around that, because I don't know what it is about seeing unhealthy people, but it's a little bit bothersome. And I don't know if that's something that I need to work on or if...
no,
right?
Trust me, man, you're doing good. You don't want to feel how I feel because I personally am trying to work on it. It's more than just bothersome for me. Yeah. It's really upsetting. It hurts me a lot. Seeing a lot of really, in particular, like adults, for sure. I can just give up on adults, that's fine. But kids in general, and it's just really bad. It's really bad nowadays.
Yeah, I like that because it can be argued that if we have this acceptance,
it makes me like really internally. Obviously, I try not to let it out, but really angry.
Yeah.
And not like just like a aimless way, but just like a pretty focused, channelized anger towards a lot of different things. Yeah, the kids that are just super fat and like, you know, they can't do anything. They can't do what most kids have been able to do.
I think that's super important because, again, we say, well, it doesn't matter, it's a personal choice. But if we have this general acceptance of the majority, and at this point it is a majority of our population is like medically obese. Yeah. If we have that acceptance of that, then kids are going to come up in the world thinking that's okay, and we're dooming them to live shorter and less satisfying lives. It doesn't feel as good to be unhealthy.
Yeah, so I think there's so much to this. When people are fat and overweight, especially kids, you're cultivating this mindset of instant gratification, right?
Yeah.
Laziness in general, lack of discipline, all these personality traits that just get rooted into these people at a very young age. And I mean, as you know, and everyone knows, when you are a little kid, everything that happens stays with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's how the world is to you.
Exactly, right? So when these kids grow up, like, we're going to need, as a society, we need people to work in all these different, facets to do different things for society.
Yeah.
And if everyone is just fat and lazy and, doesn't want to work and all this stuff, I mean, it's just going to make everything kind of topple,
Yeah.
And I understand that's it's not that easy. Like, it wouldn't be that easy for everything to just fall apart just because people are lazy and fat. I mean, they already are. So
yeah.
But yeah, it's just it's not good. I think a way to combat it though is well, I was going to ask you, why are you against soda tax?
It goes back to that personal choice thing, right? So
let me ask you real quick.
Yeah.
You're for taxes on alcohol?
My thing at this point is because they're already here and they fund certain programs that I consider necessary, then I'm kind of like...
If we didn't already have these things, alcohol, cigarettes,
marijuana,
whatever it is. Well, I'm not counting marijuana because marijuana doesn't give you cancer. It doesn't kill you.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
So specifically to health, not just vices.
Alcohol kills a lot of people.
Yeah.
Cigarettes kill a lot of people.
Yeah.
Overconsumption of processed fats and processed sugars kills a lot more people.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, that's a good point. But again, it goes back to that personal choice thing. So if you are choosing to consume something that you know is killing you, that's your choice, I think.
Right. So why not put a tax on it? It's too easy.
Because, well, the reason that the soda tax was originally pushed, and I think maybe I'm more opposed to this idea than maybe somebody could argue why the tax would be a good idea to me. But the reason that it's been pushed before is that they want to discourage people from drinking those by making it more expensive, right? And to me, that's not the role of a government, right? I don't think it's the role of the government to decide how people behave. I think it's the role of the government to set up infrastructure to be able to assist us in being successful, right? So I think those are like, if you want to do whatever you want in your personal life, I think that's okay as long as it's not hurting people. And if it's hurting yourself, then at that point, I think you're the only one that has the choice over that. So
interesting. Well, okay, so you said that you appreciate the programs that the money from the taxes on cigarettes and alcohol funds, right?
Yeah, some of it goes to education funding, especially here in Utah. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So if these parents who are overweight and their kids who are overweight are going to continue to eat their Cheetos and their Doritos and their sodas and these things that are categorically known to cause health issues, right? Like, they are literally known as empty carbs, which I have a problem with that saying. It doesn't matter, but they are literally
simple
known
carbs,
for just being
whatever.
like crap junk food, right? Yeah. In the category of junk food, one of the first things that comes to my mind is Doritos, right? Or soda or candy, right? Yeah. All these things. So if health is lacking in our kids because of funding in our education, why can't we tax these things that degrade health and use the money that we put on it, or use the money that we gain from the taxes on those things to fund health programs?
I like that.
To educate people on it.
Something I'll have to think about, because I do like that idea of using something that's causing the negative impact in society to try to fix that and for future generations. So that's something that I hadn't heard before.
People are going to stop. Like, they're addicted, right? Like, sugar's more addicting than anything else in the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at cigarettes, like, people have put like rotting lungs and stuff that are actually happening to real smokers on the cover, and people still buy them like crazy, right? Like, nicotine addiction is real, and same with the chemical addictions that are like the additive chemicals that are in the cigarettes. Like, people are just as addicted to those chemicals as they are the nicotine.
Yeah, I think this is really important because any addict who hasn't confronted their addiction yet will be defensive when you confront them about it, right?
Exactly.
And so maybe that's the reason why these people who are eating so much sugar and salt are saying, don't bother me, what does it matter to you? Because they just don't want to think about it when they know it's really a problem.
Yeah. And what kind of like, I guess I could say resources, but like what avenues do we have for addicts in our society to fall into when, you know, they're faced with these challenges in the confrontation of their addiction?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at like the heroin issues, right, meth issues, a lot of these heavy drug uses, alcohol, cigarettes, that kind of thing. Addiction in general is a huge thing in this country, and it's a big problem that we don't have like better programs for a lot of those people that suffer those things.
It's either something that becomes culturally accepted, like coffee or sugar, or it becomes something that's so taboo that you ignore it, like hard drugs.
It's almost like they're deadbeats. They're like has-beens.
It's their fault.
And like they're never, you know, like just don't associate with them. They're too far gone.
Yeah.
Like no, they're you. They just had a different substance. They were addicted to cigarettes and not sugar.
Yeah.
And processed fats and whatever you're addicted to because you're 100 pounds overweight. So clearly you're addicted to something.
Yeah.
Whether it's video games, lack of exercise, it doesn't matter. It's addiction in and of itself.
Yeah.
That's crushing these people because we're all getting hacked through these chemicals, right? It's almost something you can't control.
Yeah.
Unless your ability to kind of decide things for yourself, willpower, discipline, that kind of thing, is harnessed at a young age.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's not, it's way harder to do when you get older. Yeah. It's still important, but way harder. Okay. Well, I said we were going to transition a while ago, but that was a great conversation. So I want to transition into flow arts. So something that is great for health, and that's actually how we met, is flow arts. Mm-hmm. So first, let's just start with, how do you define flow arts? Maybe for some people who are listening who have never heard of them, but also it's great to get everyone's view on this.
Defining flow arts is kind of like a two-part thing. You have art, right, which is an expression of how you feel in whatever modality that interests you, whether it's music, whether it's painting, whether it's dance, whether it's whatever, man. I mean, stand-up comedy is an art form.
Yeah.
Even like a politician, like what they do is an art form.
Absolutely.
Like they're expressing these like things, these agendas, right?
Yeah.
And they're doing it in a creative way.
Yeah.
And they're good at it. Right? I mean,
Very
like
much
there's art in everything. And so, but what I think it is at its foundation is expression of yourself, right?
Yeah.
Pure expression too. And flow arts, like things that are flow, just means that it's dynamic. So it could involve you know, using your body, but it could involve using your body in conjunction with some sort of prop. So flow for me is it's like the perfect relationship between your physical self and your mental self.
Yeah.
And your spiritual self. Like it's like a symbiosis all coming together, and everybody's acting at the same time.
Yeah.
And in sync with each other. So you can flow anything. Like you can just flow doing your math homework, right? You can flow doing the dishes.
Absolutely.
My first experience with flow was snowboarding and skateboarding and playing hockey. You just get to this point where you're not thinking consciously and you're just expressing. You're just doing. And so combine that with art, and now you're using creative expression of how you feel and what you think in a dynamic way.
Awesome. I really like that definition. So how did you find flow arts? How'd you get into them? What interested you?
I was at a concert, saw some guy spinning a staff that was on fire,
and
I thought it was crazy as hell.
Yeah.
I was like, that guy looks so cool right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just wicked, man. He was just on fire, like, you know, just like a tornado around him, and he was just moving it around himself, but he was also like in it in a way. Like there was like this bubble of energy that was just swirling around, and he was orchestrating it all and in complete control of it. And like, it's kind of like when you watch a movie or you go to a concert or you see a play, when something invokes you to feel in general, to me is like kind of, it's like art in general. I really respect it. I've had a problem with how, like, addressing my emotions my whole life.
Sure.
And so whenever I'm met with something that makes me feel like something, whether it's good or it's just something in general, but I'm aware that I'm now feeling that because of what it kind of taking in.
Yeah.
I was like drawn to it right away.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. I was like, wow, I would like to be that guy one day. Like, that's so
Yeah. So what was after seeing that, so you kind of said like you want to be that guy. So like that was your motivation. And I think
it's like I want to be able to admit that.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. And I think that was why I got into flow arts too. And I think a lot of people do. Do you think there's a connection between the type of people who get interested in this type of art specifically and the fact that it's a performance as well?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a connection between anybody who has a common interest, you know, in more than one way.
Sure.
Yep. But yeah, the flow arts in general is cool because it can be a choreographed performance, which is more of just like the appreciation of just the sheer work and talent that got put into the preparation for that. So you are kind of like bleeding this edge between like the art form itself and performance in general, right? So like any type of like dance recital or for instance, this last weekend we were just at my girlfriend's little sister's. She's in like this, I forgot what it's called, but they're an orchestrated band. They have like a drum line and like what are they called? Glockenspiel things or whatever with like the big tubes. Marimbas. It's all synchronized and there's like 30 of them.
Wow.
And they're doing like these like things. It's a performance though, right?
Yeah.
But there's still like raw talent.
Right.
But then each one of those things in and of itself is an art form
that
you got to be good at. So I think there's a lot of that for sure.
Yeah.
And it's just like the sheer appreciation of how much, like the more you get into it, the more you realize that it takes a lot for your brain just to manage like how to break things down and progress and learn, let alone to choreograph a sequence of things that's synced up to music.
Yeah.
And then you start involving multiple people and you're like, this gets so complicated.
Yeah.
Like not only do you have the skill to be able to just do any of that in and of itself, but now you have the brain capacity to like manage it and direct it. That's insane to me.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned about the brain capacity thing, because I feel like flow arts is as much of an exercise physically as it is mentally.
Right, 100% agree. And that's what I was saying. So you have like this symbiosis of mind, body, and spirit. Your spirit's like your style, right? It's like your brain is figuring out methods and theories and frameworks of how to like manipulate and move things either with yourself or around yourself. And then you have your body. Obviously, you need the physical ability to make your arm do a full circle you know, in both directions. You need the coordination between your mind and your body to do that whole right brain, left brain kind of thing, like hop on one leg, rub your belly, pat your head. Hand-eye coordination, and then, you know, like I said, spirit, you have like, you want to be able to, you don't want to look like everybody else. So how do you individualize yourself and set yourself apart? Well, you need to have spirit involved. You need to have like spunk. You need to have funkiness. You need to have confidence. Like that all comes from like your subconscious, you know.
That's super cool. So something that I think is unique to flow arts that isn't necessarily taking place in other hobbies is the fact that, and I think a lot of people who learn flow arts say this, is that when you learn a prop, whatever it is, you suddenly feel way more able to learn any other skill. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact of what you just laid out is it has to do with hand-eye coordination. You're teaching yourself a new pattern. You have to idealize it. You have to learn like how your body's going to move. So you're involving a lot of different components of your brain, whereas some other hobbies may just be like one thing. There probably are other hobbies that can relate to this, but I feel like flow art specifically is so good at just giving you that ability to learn anything. I guess how would you describe like what that's like or how that happens?
Yeah, I think flow arts in general, it teaches you how to learn, not necessarily. It isn't just like, because not everybody learns. You know, you have some freaks that are like a year into spinning whatever prop, and they're like, all right, man. Sure. 1 year? Like, you sure it wasn't
Sure,
8,
that was a year, yeah.
And then you have some people who are like 10 years deep and, you know, they struggle a lot. And what it does is it presents this opportunity for you to understand the process of learning if you're open to it.
Yeah.
Not everybody is. Not everybody can see it in that manner, but it will always be there.
Yeah.
So when you do decide to open yourself up to understanding what that process is, the flow arts are the best way, or one of the best ways, I think, to really break down the learning process in general. You have a trick. I mean, really, it's any trick-based system. Like, I learned a lot. I think the reason why I picked up Poi relatively quickly was because I skateboarded a lot of my life, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like, I want to be able to kickflip, or I want to be able to ollie. These tricks that I wanted to do, well, I would like break them down. And I remember playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, turning the dude like sideways and like watching him ollie and see what his feet were doing.
Cool, yeah.
And I was like, okay, I just need to make my feet do that, right?
Yeah.
And so what's cool and what's unique about flow arts is the ability to, the ease of entry, the ease of physical entry, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody physically is mostly capable of being able to perform these things.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like breaking it down to its most simple form and then building it up step by step. But like skateboarding, the physical prerequisites to be able to ollie is pretty high, right?
Yeah.
Like for most people, I mean, less than 1% of most people can like kickflip and ollie, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so but like most people can spin a thing. Like you get, put a lanyard with the keys on the end of it in someone's hand, they're spinning it, right?
Yeah.
All you have to do is spin it in front of you, now spin it behind you.
Yeah.
Okay, now do it with both hands, and the next thing you know, we're like off, and now we're stacking tricks on top of each other.
Cool.
And we've just broke down the learning process in it, right there.
So I think you pointed out two ways that flow arts have a low barrier to entry. The first one is how you very well put it, is that anybody can do something, like spin something. Anybody can pick up a staff and move it around, and you've learned like actually your first trick.
Yeah.
But the other thing is about how it's so like visually available to understand how it works. Like you explained it with a skateboard, where you can break it down. Oh, that's how my feet are supposed to move.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something that's not present in other hobbies. So the first one that came to mind, because this is something that I do eventually want to learn, is like music production. And like music production, you can watch someone produce music, even if you're watching the program work and watching their hands move, and you have no idea. You really would have to be inside their mind, understanding what the next step is to get there, right?
You just need to be familiar with all the tools.
Yeah, like at a certain point, if somebody's giving you a tutorial and explaining it all.
Right.
But with Poi, like how I learned a lot of my moves was I just watched a video, and it could have been complicated, but as long as you can watch it over and over again, you can figure out the whole thing.
Yeah, I think in that regard, it does tend to favor people who are visual learners. People who are like, visual learners, but also hands-on, you know?
Yeah.
Or people who are, there is no, I forgot what the term is for all those different styles of learning. But
there's like kinetic learning, which is the hands-on type.
Is there not a word to describe like the whole thing?
Oh, not that I know of.
Like the categories and stuff.
If I find it, I'll put it right there.
All right. I don't know if there is. Anyways, but you know, you have people who are like, I learn best by using my hands. I learn best by listening. I learn best by seeing. And then you have people who are like, I don't really care. Like I'll learn whatever, doing whatever. Yeah. I think flow arts really favor those types of people for sure, and you see them excel quicker than most other people. And I think that's what brings a lot of like the quote unquote good ones together. Yeah. Is because they have that relatability. Like they're not limited by any way of, like by their way of learning. Sure. They're like, I can learn however.
Yeah.
You know, so
that's something that I really
start off watching
enjoy.
videos, the next thing you know, you're like, you just see somebody do a trick and you play it around in your head a couple times, and then you try it and you're like, oh, that was easy. I got it down.
Exactly. I love that. I love that. Okay. How are you feeling about the time?
I don't care.
Cool.
We're good.
Awesome. So another thing that's kind of connected to flow arts that you've talked to me about a lot, and is something that you kind of put more on my radar. I had, maybe thought about it briefly, but hadn't considered what the details would be like, or even fleshing out the ideas like you have. So, and this is curated experiences. And so the way that I would define this is just anything that tries to take as many of your senses as possible and direct them to one experience, so that your whole entire experience is being directed by one source. Right. Would you agree with that definition? If not, how would you define it? And then
I would agree that your experience is being directed.
Okay.
It's being directed by somebody or something, right? Like you are, the way you feel, like when you're at some sort of curated event or curated experience, the way you feel in that moment at the peak time of that event isn't by accident.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that is like the essence of a curated experience. I think maybe that term gets a little bit overused nowadays. I think people have a loose definition maybe of what like a true curation really is. But to me, it's just like you're just directed to be feeling and thinking the things that you're feeling and thinking right now.
Yeah.
Like, that's not an accident. That was intended to be that way from the birth of this event or whatever it is that's making you feel that way.
Cool. So what got you interested into that? Was there like an event that you saw that was like, that's awesome, or?
I don't know. I just kind of feel like going to everybody's interested in getting together and doing things and going to concerts and going to festivals and going to conventions and expos, whatever. Yeah. But it's like you show up, you do your own thing, and then you leave, and then you have memories of your favorite parts of the weekend, whatever. But it wasn't until I forgot where I started seeing it, but like there was almost like you could say subliminal messaging being done where you leave the weekend or you leave the day or you leave the night, you walk away from it, you know, with your normal experience, with your normal, like you hung out with your friends, you got to have a good time, good jokes, good music, whatever it is. But then a couple days later, you're thinking about this a couple things over and over again, and it wasn't something you had thought about until you experienced that. And it was like an overlapping effect. A couple days later, you kept thinking like these things, whether it's like, you know, you had your eyes opened up to kind of some of the negatives about our society and how we operate. Maybe you had a lot of self-reflection on your own life and how it's going, and you're not happy with it, or, you know, what job you're working, or, you know, even just the amount of money you have or the things that you have, how you're not happy about how many things you do have and you want to get rid of more things like that. There's like themes that make you just keep thinking about it, and then it causes change in your life, mostly towards the positive direction, right?
Yeah.
But either way, there's like a curated experience should cause change in your life. It should cause some sort of disruption in your normal thought patterns and your loops that you're in every day. And you should be left with like kind of a big question mark of like, what am I going to do about that?
Like, what's next?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. So I don't think you've actually expressed that part of it to me before. And I think that's really cool because not only is it about going to this experience and having a really good time, but it's about having it affect you after and be something that actually improved your life rather than just being like a fleeting experience.
What I was saying was probably a little deep. On the surface level, if I go to a curated event, right, and I'm like, this is so cool, it makes me want to do it, or it makes me want to get involved, mission accomplished.
Cool. That's
what a curated event does. If I go to an event and I'm just like, it's kind of whack, you know, like, there's a lot of things here that weren't thought about, weren't planned for, and there's just kind of like, this is just here just so everyone can party kind of thing.
Cool.
You know?
So I would say to tie those two together, like something that inspires you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Cool.
There's a word for that.
Yeah. No,
inspiration.
Yeah. No, I think that's really cool.
Inspiration and motivation. Same thing.
Fair, yeah.
They're going at the same time.
Yeah. That's cool.
You can be inspired, but like, you want something that's going to inspire you, but also like make you want to act too.
Yeah, true. Yeah, motivation isn't always as strong with inspiration. Yeah. I like how you said about inspiring change and along the theme of improvement. And that's something that I've always thought was really important about the collective festival experience, was that when we all get together, like you said, we all like to get together and go to experiences together. When we do that, we have the opportunity to come up with new ideas, to move society forward, and also those experiences are relaxing too, right? So they're kind of a release. So you get into this like new state that you haven't been in all year. You're around all of your best friends who think similar things as you. And I think there's such a missed opportunity in so many festival experiences to actually focus on that and to realize that right now we have so much potential because we all came together.
Honestly, I'm going to one-up you a little bit, and I think that what you're saying is 100% true. But I don't even think it's something that, it's not even just during the festival experience. It's like kickbacks, man, barbecues. Like, yeah, you want to get together and relax and just have some times with friends, just some good times with friends. But every now and then, like, make a thing about it. Like, hey, I gathered everybody here today because I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts on these things, you know? And, like, cool. It's more or less like, instead of having just a group of friends, it's inviting people who aren't necessarily your preference, but it's like anybody who's willing to share their viewpoint. Yeah. You're not willing to share, well then, I mean, tonight's probably not the best night for you. But you're welcome any other time, right? Sure. But tonight is all about sharing our viewpoints and our opinions on things. Yeah. And we have these topics. And I think that'd be cool to, like, start to kind of do. I mean, sometimes it happens naturally between, like, people who think like we do, you know? Right, yeah. But it's almost like encouraging it to bring it out of people, because I don't think people understand how enjoyable it is to discuss those types of things until they do. It's so stimulating to think about the biggest topics that affect us. Yeah. So... And it makes you feel like you're... I mean, so many times... I mean, for instance, for me, I constantly feel like things are just happening to me, right? Everybody kind of feels like life is just happening to you. Sure. But it helps you feel engaged with life. Yeah. And you're in control. And that's what we need. Even if you're just expressing your opinion and viewpoint on something, you still feel engaged. That's extremely important. Yeah. So one thought that came to mind when you said this is that this is desperately needed, and it used to be a normal part of our society. Mm-hmm. So I think probably for thousands of years, when humans gathered around the campfire at night, they were talking about how we can solve our problems, right? And then even like in more modern history, you think back to like the Greek like societies and Roman societies, and they had public forums where they would just go and discuss big issues, and it was normal. You would go after work or whatever and go talk to people about the biggest things. And I think there's two obstacles in our society and why that's not happening right now. One of them is because everything, to actually make change and to make a movement, we have this feeling that it has to be so official, right? You have to establish a nonprofit or something like that. Or it needs to be like completely fucking thought about. Exactly. Like if you show up and they haven't thought about every detail, you think it's probably not worth my time, rather than I need to engage and add to this, right? Yeah. The other thing though is that talking about controversial topics especially has become so taboo. It's become something that you're not supposed to do. It's not correct in polite society. So I guess taking those two problems, what are your thoughts on how we fix those? Encouraging people to practice talking about controversial things, and like bringing up things that you know are going to irritate you with people who are going to say things in a way that you know are going to irritate you. Yeah. And practicing just listening and not reacting and just hearing what they have to say. Right. It's just a skill. It's all it is. And we're so far away from it because of our phones and because of the internet. We're just constantly drowning in echo chambers and rage culture who's like, did you know this? And everybody's just always like, for a good example would be when you're talking to strangers, it's super easy to start conversations with people you've never known before by complaining about the weather, by complaining about traffic. Right? There's like these commonalities that are always negative, and they're super easy to start conversations with. So if you know you don't have something in common with somebody, what you know you have in common with is things that you hate, which is bad traffic, bad weather, like all these different things. Yeah. It'd be cool to start practicing talking to strangers and seeking commonalities instead of seeking things that you don't like together. Yeah. Seek things that you do like together. Cool. I know it's hard, and it's definitely not a new idea, but just encouraging that. And the only way to do that is to let people finish their thoughts, let people complete things. Because if somebody asks me a question that's about a controversial topic, I may just have an answer that wasn't the most thought out, and in saying it out loud made me realize the flaws in how I was thinking about it. Sure. And in that moment, I changed my opinion just based off of how I was hearing myself say it. And I was like, that doesn't sound good. I don't like the way I viewed that thing, you know? Yeah. And I've changed it. But if I wasn't given the opportunity to talk it out, then I wouldn't have never changed my view on it. You know? Yeah. That's super important. And I like what you said, like people can't listen. And that's why we don't have conversations. Part of the reason why I think that is that we're constantly stimulated with the next thing to be enraged about, like you said. Yeah. And I've heard this topic
talked about in the context of people who work in the news. Like, they don't even have the ability to dive deep into the story and really understand what's going on before they report it, because they have an hour by hour schedule of news stories to report.
Right.
And that gives them the inability to give us the news correctly.
Yeah.
But then we also have that happening in our own lives, where we have this day-to-day news cycle of new things to be enraged about, but then we also have this, like, every 15 minutes there's a new tweet that somebody tweeted and we can call it stupid or whatever. So yeah, and I think a lot of that is social media. I think social media is a huge part of that issue.
Yeah.
I said just Twitter, but I think it's all of it. How can we make social media more of a tool that's available to be beneficial rather than something that's constantly a negative in our lives?
This is something I think about a lot, and I don't know. I think obviously I'm really excited. We're in a rough transition period right now, but I really think we're transitioning towards a better place where there's less corporatized and privatized news and social media sources.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe not privatized, like that's kind of inevitable, but whatever, you know what I'm saying, like big mainstream sources of like news and information, as that tends to go away and we start to just like get whatever it is that we want from authentic sources, like whatever Substack's doing.
Yeah.
Spotify's doing it a lot too. It's pretty cool. Eventually, I think we're gonna get to a point where we're gonna figure all that out, and we're gonna have a pretty good source to go to, or a resource to go to, where you can get what you need and not what they say you need. But you get to decide what you need and what you want to hear and what you want to read, and not what they get to decide. So they being, you know, the big tech companies, right? Like we all know who they are.
Of course.
They get to censor us, right? They get to decide. They're sitting up in their offices deciding what's offensive and what's not offensive, what's good information, what's bad information, what's newsworthy, what's not newsworthy. That's not how this works.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think utilizing those things and making and labeling them as a public tool.
Yes.
Right? And a public, there's a word for it. I forget what the word is.
Utility.
Utility, public utility, right? I think you just said that, but I was thinking it. But yeah, treating news and treating social media as a public utility.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would be cool to see them fractalize a little bit, right? Because they're so big right now.
Yeah.
And they're so just corporatized and profit driven that it's insane. So I would love to see it fractalize, and just like the music industry, you have rock, but really, what do we have? We have indie rock, we have alt rock, we have like post-apocalypse, whatever. Okay. We got screamo, metal, like we have so many different categories of rock, right?
Yeah.
And that's just one genre. We have how many different genres? A million, right? And so it's fractalized, and it's because everybody. It's kind of like Reddit, right? Like you get to have like these, you get to curate your own experience. Sure. And if something's not doing it for you, then bye. Like you just get to.
Okay, so I want to touch on that. I think one of the things that's such a problem with social media, especially right now, because once we get like independent media taking over, that solves like cable news problem, but social media still needs to be solved. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest problems is algorithms and how they direct our attention and try to engage us.
Once YouTube and Facebook and all these other companies started using algorithms, things started getting censored out of control, and people just started having.
That gave them the ability to censor. And, so
you're gonna blame it on their AI, whatever that is. Yeah.
So what you're saying, and I want to connect this back to another thing you said about gathering around good things rather than gathering around things to complain about. I think one issue we have with that is that the internet has shoved us into all of these niche categories where I'm not going to get along with any of my neighbors because none of them spin poi or participate in flow arts, but I can go and but I can go and find you living 10 miles away on Instagram, and all of a sudden like we can hang out. So the ability to curate your own experience doesn't solve that problem because it still puts you into a niche. But it does solve the problem of your attention being directed. So my question is, do you think that keeping the internet more general does that weigh out as being more of a benefit because it kind of brings us all closer together, or do you think we should still keep it niched, for lack of a better word, but just give ourselves control of that algorithm?
I think giving us more control obviously is always going to be better.
Yeah.
People always start off with the best intention, but as soon as you give anybody control over anybody,
Yeah.
they get lost.
Well, so let's say that those companies, though, let's say that we make algorithms illegal. Would it be better to have a blank slate of a social media platform where there's no algorithm, or be better where we have control of an algorithm?
I don't know. I think the internet's really complicated, man. I think people.
That's a big question.
The internet's extremely complicated, and people are even more complicated than that. And we're trying to find out what's ideal for both. I don't think there's going to be one answer.
Fair.
One thing that I think would be super cool, though, this is something I'm still trying to work out, but it's kind of like I want to know what's going on in this area, right?
Yeah.
In the whole, let's say by county. I want to know what's going on in Davis County. I want to know like crime, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't really read the newspaper. I don't really care much for it because it's just all ads, right? Like I hate it. There's like an article and then there's like 40 commercials right next to it. It's annoying.
Yeah.
So I just don't do it. And then I don't have cable because it's 2022.
Yeah. Streaming platforms exist.
Like who uses cable?
Yeah.
Like just the resolution on it in and of itself is like unacceptable.
There's no 4K.
Yeah, exactly. Which sounds crazy to say, but it's like it's too easy.
We can get it other places.
It's too easy to make it better, right?
Yeah.
It's just too easy. And I get it because it's it's a public thing, so it just doesn't have the funding.
Yeah.
But anyway, so digital cable, whatever, not into it. Satellite, hard no, right? Like not into that whatsoever.
Right.
What we do have is the internet, and obviously our news sources or our resources to get all this information is super poor or non-existent or not trustworthy.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool to have something that you can trust, meaning like it's relatively safe and secure to access when it comes to finding information on what you want. You can regionalize it or categorize it. So for instance, like I can look at Davis County, right? Mm-hmm. But then I could also increase my reach to central Utah.
Okay.
Right, and then I could also increase my whole display to the western side of the United States.
And is this for like news or events or all of the above?
All of the above.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
It would be cool to start off as news, but it would get even better because, like, I guess what I'm alluding to and what we have yet to talk about yet, which is a strong thing that I feel about, is I think what would solve a lot of problems, especially with our disconnect because of the intrusion of the internet, right, in our lives. The disconnect that we feel between each other in public sphere, like you're saying that you're not necessarily going to get along with your neighbors because you don't really have common interests.
Sure.
But there should still be a baseline level of like etiquette and cordialness between all people that live within the same communities.
Absolutely. Which
just comes down to, and it used to be that way. Like, you move into somewhere new and you have every neighbor on the street greeting you. You go and make the rounds and you give them all cookies and you introduce yourself. That happened like twice in my life, and I've moved like 13 or 14 times, Yeah. And so it's just, I mean, granted, they probably got a good look at me and they're like, oh, it's just some like 20-year-old punk, like whatever. We know who you are.
Yeah.
But either way, it comes down to people are not connected anymore.
Yeah.
In real life.
Yeah.
Like they're only connected through virtual means, which is fine for getting people that when you're just like, man, I have all these people around me, but like no one just is into the stuff that I'm into.
Yeah.
That's what the internet's great for.
Yeah.
But there's a basic human necessity that I don't think people understand, which is being like balancing yourself out by being around a bunch of people that have no interests in what you're interested in, other than the fact that we love this country, we love where we live, we love the way our lives are being lived, and we want to sustain that. And there's only one way we can do that, and that's by staying together. Yeah. Right?
Very well put.
And so just encouraging like real life community kind of like interactions would really help out a lot. And I think a lot of that gets lost. I mean, you notice, like, especially here in Utah, it's so bad. I'm sure it's worse in like California or wherever, but like everything just gets bulldozed, and then what goes up? Some corporate box store.
A chain.
There's no like local, small, entrepreneurial, eateries or coffee places. Like it's all some like big business plan or some chain or franchised business who's, putting up their 12th store in like the 30-mile radius.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I think a lot of the local like small business stuff doesn't succeed because we just don't know it exists.
Yeah.
Whereas if we had a resource where everybody could like encourage and support local businesses and whatnot, I think it would bring a lot more people together. It would just encourage a lot more interaction, and it would create a lot more diversity on like not just a state by state level, but like a county by county, town by town, city by city level.
Yeah.
Every city would be different because we all have, right now you go like every city's like the same. You go to Denver, you go to Idaho Falls, whatever. Or I'm sorry, Boise. It's like I know there's gonna be these stores there. I know there's gonna be like I know where
Subway,
I'm
McDonald's.
I know where I'm gonna eat. Like it's all there.
Yeah.
That's cool for traveling, sure,
Right.
but for living, no. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable.
I agree.
We're limiting ourselves to so much like potential growth.
Yeah.
Of who we are. Like we're so focused on civilization on a global scale or on a national scale. But like that's gonna get blunted and stopped so quick if it hasn't already.
Yeah.
Just because we're not focusing on the smaller foundational levels, which is your local communities, cities, counties, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The more we expand growth there on a personal level, not just like how many Starbucks are here in a square mile radius, but like how many small businesses do we have that have not been replicated yet?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. How many coffee shops, whatever it is,
Right.
are being produced and manufactured here in Salt Lake for other people that live in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Not for, people that live in Argentina or wherever.
Right.
Just here.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, Arizona's like, they got some cool stuff going on over there. We got some cool stuff too. And then you open up trade between those two states.
Yes.
And it spreads. And then next thing you know, the whole country's catching on and the national level is growing.
Yeah.
Rather than,
Yeah, I couldn't have put all of that better myself. I think community.
I was just winging it.
Yeah, that was great. I think community is extremely important, and it's something we lack so badly right now.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, we're too tuned into the world.
Yeah.
We're tuned into these macro level problems.
Yeah.
That's what government's there to like think about. That's what we have all these think tanks and task force to kind of like solve for us.
Obviously, that's why we have votes and all that stuff.
We need to check in on those people so they're not run away with some crap. But like for the most part, those people exist so that we can focus on our daily lives here and what's being affected by us here.
Yeah.
Short range. You know what I mean? Like most people in this valley shouldn't even know what's going on in Germany.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or shouldn't really know what's going on in general anywhere else besides here, let alone the rest of the United States.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like there are certain issues that are obviously important for everyone to know, but not at the degree that we're currently being passed out national information.
Yeah. People know more about like Africa and South Africa or South America and like, obviously this Ukraine crap that's going on in Russia and China more than they know about like Arkansas.
Yeah.
Or Kentucky or any of the corruption that's going on in Washington,
or even
D.C.
your local city council meetings.
Right. And I'm guilty of that myself. Like, but I am a transplant, so I have that excuse.
Sure.
It's not the best excuse because I don't know crap that's going on where I just came from. You know what I mean? Like local government's level, I haven't even considered it. You know, like in any of that stuff. I know more about what's going on outside of our borders than I do. Not just what's going on inside of our borders, but what's going on inside of our towns. What's going on inside of my state. Right? The state that I'm born at, that I'm like loyal till I die. I don't even know what's going on at the local government or even the local county level stuff.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah, it is sad. And I think part of that reason is because we have so much going on that we feel overwhelmed. And I think if we fix social media, if we fix mainstream media, then maybe that would help us get back to like, we can kind of exist in a comfortable space and start to realize what's going on around us again.
My fantasy is to have a whoops and then shut the internet off for 2 or 3 months.
Sure.
Right? See what happens. I know.
A lot of stuff would
be crazy.
Yeah.
It'd be crazy. It'd be super crazy. I would love it. I would love every minute of it.
I'm on board with that to a degree. I just worry about like financial implications, right? Like the financial system would just crumble.
It'll all work out. It's fine.
Fair enough.
It'll all work out in the future. Yeah, honestly, like people are so afraid of dealing with consequences that may last a couple weeks.
Yeah.
But look at the grand scheme of things. Like we're here for, I don't know, hopefully 100 years per person, right?
Right.
Realistically, like 60, 70.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we have financial consequences from an experiment that lasts a couple weeks, maybe a year, maybe a few months, whatever.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. And it was worth a try, because
Yeah.
what if it changes everything for the better?
I support the idea of shutting down social media for a long period of time. Basically my main concern is infrastructure, right? So like if we shut down the internet across the world, then like international banking would shut down. How do we go buy food?
Right. So like okay, so
those kind of things is what I'm concerned about.
You limit it to just like professional,
Sure,
whatever use.
Yeah.
I mean, we know the people like the end user is still gonna mess that up somehow. But I think we would learn so much about ourselves, our society, our communities.
Yeah, we're still in this period where the internet is new, where we don't even realize what it's done to us yet, and we're just diving further and further into it.
It's literally exactly what cigarettes were. It's
Sure.
exactly what processed sugar is. Like once we learned the ability to like refine and concentrate and pull all the sugar out of everything and then make our own food with it, we just took off. And next thing you know, like globally, everybody's pretty fat and gross, and it's like, man, we need to take care of that.
Yeah.
Same with cigarettes. Like people were like, cigarettes are great, they're not bad for you at all, and then people start dropping like flies because of cancer.
Yeah.
And now we've really severely limited our use on cigarettes.
Yeah, so a
At some point we're
lesson.
gonna find out people are gonna start dying from the internet, and hopefully we start limiting it.
I mean, I think it's probably increased depression, anxiety, suicide rates already. You know.
Probably, I
So,
think it's a pretty well known fact that is
Yeah.
like the internet has to be one of the biggest contributors to suicide in today's day and age, which is at alarming rates, more than it already was at an alarming rate, and now it's like double, and you're like,
yeah.
no one's even talking about it.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think I'm running out of a bit of steam, so
Yeah,
I think we're.
I could go all day.
Cool. Well, that was fantastic. I think that'll be a good episode. Maybe we can do another one some other time. But thanks for coming on. Do you want to give any shout outs to your work or social handles?
Nah.
Okay.
I'm good.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, and thanks for checking it out, guys. And we'll see you for the next one. Thanks for watching this episode of Thinking It Through with Nate. As always, you can help me fight the algorithms by subscribing on Supercast, link down in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and follow, hit that like button and bell icon. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Yeah, so I do talk about subjects like that, but like, I kind of just want this to be a place where people can talk about big ideas, and especially ideas that maybe people have considered before, but where we can dive one step further and just kind of like get to a thought where maybe people haven't thought of, but when you get to that thought, it actually significantly changes how you see the subject. Like that was kind of my motivation behind the whole podcast. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Tight.